Okay, and then the last thing was the most popular article on ISLabs is the split routing one. And I've spoken to our main techie guy, a guy called Neil Druck. Very, very smart guy who understands how the stuff is put together. What he was saying is that, and you, when we talked about it earlier, is that the ability to pay for the amount of international traffic you use and the amount of local traffic you use is something that is relevant to a very small chunk of the market. Like if I take my dad doesn't actually understand the difference between...
Yeah, I mean, so clearly I'm the less tech literate out of the three of us, and from where I see it, the market wants less complexity. They want less bundles, less caps, less complexity in purchasing their broadband. So this is antithetical to that.
Yeah.
Not to say the idea isn't valid.
Yeah.
I'm not convinced, so I don't know how you feel on this one.
But what's interesting about this is how I always look at voice as kind of moving towards the data space, and data space moving towards the voice space. So we call it convergence, but for want of a better term. But it's also an understanding of how things work. When you pay for your phone calls, right, you always used to know that I'm going to pay £2.50 a minute to call someone in the UK, but I'm going to pay 60 cents to call locally. That's something we've always understood. But now we buy a bundle. And we know that I buy 5,000 minutes worth of calls.
Yeah.
And what they're starting to do internationally is saying call wherever you want within that, and it's just based on number of minutes due to network effect. But you're also having but the internet's always been all you can eat. So it's always been as much bandwidth as you can, but with Comcast's announcement and AT&T's announcements and Telfast and all of those guys saying, well, actually, we can't give you all you can eat, you have to go meet it. There's a middle point. So split,
So you think the trends to this middle point, which then means this is probably a better idea.
At this point, the requirement is there because people want arbitrage. When bandwidth is expensive, you want to know that you can pay separately.
So my question then is, with calls, the international call sort of idea that you put forward is absolutely valid. The key thing there is when I call overseas, I know my termination point. So my question for this would be, how do I know what content is international and what is local? And then the people who do, it's a very small portion of that market.
You only really know with HTTP, you don't know with anything else. So when you're sitting in the background and you're running your network time protocol, so when your clock goes and synchronizes, where does it go? Does it go locally? Does it go internationally? How much stuff is cached? So how much am I fetching that looks like an international request but actually is coming from a local caching server? So
how do you differentiate that to validate the split routing? I'm a little bit confused there.
Well, okay, so you can work by splitting your network, and we can say we know that packet came internationally, we know that packet came locally.
Okay.
Well, we think we do, but the thing is...
We can as an ISP.
Yeah.
How does that end user know?
Well, they would want us to bill them accordingly.
Okay.
But we're not 100% certain, because of the way the IP works, things route around.
Okay.
So you might actually be getting something from Sykes that's actually coming internationally. So you're paying an international premium for what is a local packet. And the way Telkom have built their radius infrastructure for authenticating people on the ADSL network doesn't allow us as IS to easily do that separation. Because they count all packets for us, they don't do discrimination. So we would have to have a three-tier billing model in order to implement that. And to do that would make it non-cost effective.
And would be kind of the complexity that me as an end user would want. So the only way this would work on a mass market basis for me, and I absolutely think it's a valid idea for a niche, which doesn't mean it's not profitable, it could still be well profitable. The only way it's going to work is if you say to me as an end user, we will give you cheaper bandwidth by metering this thing. That's all I care about. I don't care about what my international and what... Because I surf the internet, to me, the internet is one open cloud. All the data packets should theoretically be the same, but if you say to me, okay, this is going to be cheaper, then you might have a valid business model. But again, if you're adding the three-tier billing complexity, we know that billing is very, very expensive. The billing systems are massively expensive to set up. So I'm unconvinced.
Yeah, people want it because they want to pay less for bandwidth.
Yeah.
So.
But do they actually want split routing because they want to pay less for bandwidth, or do they just want to pay less for bandwidth? I don't care how you do it. Is what I'm trying to get to.
Yeah, no, it may be a suggested way of doing it.
Yeah. So it's more of a, so it's a great idea maybe for IS to give the customer the cheap bandwidth, but without saying the split routing.
Yeah. Well, a lot of
the marketing nuance is what I'm sort of getting at.
A lot of the suggestions on the site have been more bandwidth for less. And ways around doing that, and that's an eventual point. That's a progress, and it's the standard progress that South Africa is going through at the moment. If you look at it, bandwidth is becoming cheaper. So Telkom are.
So I fully understand that then. Okay, so the split routing is more of an ISP mechanism to deliver cheaper bandwidth, and on that basis, then I'm on board. I think it's a good idea, assuming we can do it cost effectively.
Yeah, and that's the question. And from what
so
you either need to spend money on infrastructure to be able to do this, or Telkom need to change the way they do things in order to allow us to do it with our existing infrastructure.
You say Telkom?
Yeah.
Okay, well that's never going to happen. So there is only one option, and that's for us to spend money to try and do it. So are you saying, I mean, because you're obviously more technically literate than me, split routing seems to be the best idea we've had to cheapen
it's
connectivity for the masses?
Of the ideas that have come through from the ISLabs side, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and I like.
Okay, cool. All right, so that's the ideas. Those are the discussions. Keep them coming. It's always good, and we'll do more of these catch-ups on what gets posted.
Sounds good. Thanks very much.
Okay, thanks.